Hi, I'm Natalie Torres. I spent $35,000 to bring my entire family to the most important night of my career. 3 hours before the gala, my sister commented on my event post for everyone to see. She wrote, "This is what happens when losers pretend to play with the big leagues. Embarrassing." She was already in Miami, posting champagne flutes with her real estate crew. That moment wasn't just about the insult. It was realizing she'd screenshot my invite, mocked it in her group chat, and never planned to show. But she didn't know someone else had been watching my work for months. And when I walked into that ballroom with him on my arm, the silence from my family said everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It started 6 months earlier on a Tuesday morning in Austin. I was kneeling on the hardwood floor of my studio apartment, wrapping the last of 40 hand-painted ceramic tiles in bubble wrap. Each one featured a different texture, glaze technique, and embedded message from emerging artists I'd been mentoring through a program I founded 2 years ago. The project was called Voices Unframed, and it gave artists from underserved communities a platform to showcase work without the barrier of gallery fees or institutional gatekeeping. Nobody asked me to do it. Nobody funded it at first either. I just believed art shouldn't only belong to people who could afford the right last name or the right zip code. My back ached from bending over shipping boxes all morning, but I kept going. This wasn't just another exhibit. This was the gateway. In 3 weeks, I'd secured a partnership with the Belmont Foundation, one of the most respected philanthropic organizations in the Southwest. They were hosting their annual charity gala in Aspen, and they'd agreed to feature my artists as the centerpiece. It meant exposure, funding, credibility. It meant everything I'd worked toward since leaving my corporate marketing job to chase something that actually mattered. Across the room, my laptop chimed. I straightened, brushing clay dust off my jeans, and clicked the video call. Kira Patel's face filled the screen, her dark curls pulled into a messy bun, her expression somewhere between excited and concerned. "Natalie, those sponsor packets look perfect," she said, leaning closer to her camera. "But are you sure you want to handle family travel on your own? That's a lot of money." I shook my head, forcing a smile I didn't entirely feel. "It's fine, Kira. This is the biggest night of my life. I want them there. They should see what I built." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't push. Kira had known me since college. She'd heard enough stories about holiday dinners where I sat at the far end of the table and family reunions where my achievements were mentioned in passing, if at all. She knew Crystal was the golden child, the one who closed million-dollar real estate deals and posted about it with perfect lighting and caption hashtags. She knew my parents measured success in square footage and salary, not impact or intention. We went over logistics for another 20 minutes. Vendor contracts, seating arrangements, the timeline for artist arrivals. When the call ended, I sat still for a moment, staring at my email inbox. I'd sent the travel itinerary to my family a week ago. First-class tickets from Scottsdale to Aspen for my parents. A separate ticket from Miami for Crystal and her husband Blake. 5 tickets total. $35,218. Non-refundable. I drained most of my savings and used the last of a small grant I'd won to cover it. I opened the group text thread with my family. My message sat there, unread by Crystal, hearted by my mother with no additional comment, and completely ignored by my father. I typed out a follow-up message, then deleted it. Then typed it again. "Hey, just confirming you all received the flight details. Let me know if there are any issues. This means a lot to me." I hit send and immediately regretted the last sentence. It sounded desperate. Needy. But it was true. I stood and walked to the corner of my studio where a garment bag hung from a hook near the window. Inside was the dress I'd chosen for the gala. It wasn't flashy or trendy. Just a deep emerald silk gown with a structured bodice and a subtle train. The kind of dress that whispered instead of shouted. I'd found it at a consignment shop in downtown Austin, and the moment I tried it on, I felt like someone who belonged in rooms I'd spent years being kept out of. I unzipped the bag slowly, running my fingers along the fabric. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. Walking into the Belmont ballroom with my family in the audience. My mother seeing the artists I'd mentored, their work displayed on screens and pedestals like it mattered. My father shaking hands with foundation directors, finally understanding that success wasn't just about profit margins. And Crystal, maybe just once, looking at me with something other than thinly veiled pity. The fantasy lasted about 30 seconds before my phone buzzed. It was a text from Crystal in the family group chat. Can't make it. Blake's firm is hosting a partner retreat that weekend. You understand. Business comes first. I stared at the message, my chest tightening. No apology. No acknowledgement of the ticket I'd paid for. Just a flat dismissal, like I'd invited her to a casual brunch instead of the culminating event of years of work. My mother responded immediately. Oh, that's too bad, honey. These things happen. My father didn't respond at all. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen sink. I turned on the faucet and let cold water run over my hands, grounding myself in the temperature, the sound, the simple mechanics of something I could control. I wasn't going to cry. Not yet. Not over this. But then another text came through. This time, it was just from Crystal, sent directly to me. Honestly, Nat, I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. It's a charity thing. You're not exactly winning an Oscar. Maybe dial back the drama? I read it 3 times. Each time, the words dug deeper. That night, I sat on my couch with a mug of chamomile tea that had gone cold an hour ago. My laptop was open to the Belmont Foundation's donor portal, and I was reviewing final confirmations for the gala. Catering, check. AV setup, check. Artist transportation, check. Everything was moving forward exactly as planned. Everything except the 5 empty seats I'd reserved in the front section under Torres family. My phone lit up again. Another text, this time in a different group chat. One I wasn't supposed to see. Kira had accidentally added me to a thread months ago, then removed me within seconds, but the notification had already loaded. It was a group chat between Crystal, her husband Blake, and 2 of her real estate colleagues. The preview showed my name. I shouldn't have opened it. I knew I shouldn't. But my thumb moved before my brain could stop it. The messages loaded, and my stomach dropped. Crystal had screenshot the digital invite I'd sent for the gala. The one with elegant typography and a short description of Voices Unframed. She'd posted it in the chat with a caption. My sister really thinks she's doing something important. This is what happens when you waste a business degree on finger painting with hippies. Calling it a foundation partnership, like she's running a nonprofit. Girl, you're unemployed with a hobby. Blake had replied with a laughing emoji. One of her colleagues wrote, wait, she's asking you to fly to Aspen for this? That's insane. Crystal's response came fast. She paid for the tickets herself. I'm obviously not going. I just didn't tell her yet because she'll spiral. Another message. Honestly, she's always been like this. Trying to prove she's special when she's just average. My parents are over it too. I closed the app. My hands were shaking. Not from sadness this time. From something sharper, something that burned. I set the phone face down on the coffee table and stared at the wall. The chamomile tea sat untouched beside me. Outside, the distant hum of traffic filled the silence, but inside my apartment, everything felt unnaturally still. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, letting the truth settle into my bones. They weren't coming because they didn't believe in me. They weren't coming because they never had. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight cutting through the blinds in sharp lines. My body ached from falling asleep on the couch, still dressed, phone dead beside me. I plugged it in and waited for it to power on, already bracing for whatever fresh dismissal might be waiting. There were 2 new texts. one from my mother. Your father and I talked it over. Aspen is lovely, but it's such a long trip for us right now. We'll celebrate with you another time. Proud of you, sweetie. The second was from my father. Just one sentence. Use the ticket credits for something practical. I read both messages twice, then set the phone down. I walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were tired, my hair tangled from restless sleep. But underneath all of that, something else was forming. Not sadness. Not even anger anymore. Clarity. I got dressed, pulled my hair into a low bun, and made a single cup of coffee. Then I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up the airline booking portal and stared at the 5 confirmed tickets. $35,000. Non-refundable, but transferable. I didn't cancel them. I didn't call my family to beg or explain. Instead, I opened a separate document and started writing names. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Artists from my program who couldn't afford travel. A professor from my graduate program who'd written recommendation letters when no one else believed in me. Kira, obviously. And 2 mentors from a women's entrepreneurship group I joined 3 years ago when I was barely holding things together financially. By noon, I'd reassigned every ticket. I sent personal emails to each person, explaining what the gala meant and why I wanted them there. I didn't mention my family. I didn't mention the screenshots or the group chat. I just focused on what I could control, who actually deserved to witness this moment. 3 hours later, every single person had responded. All of them said yes. That evening, I was sitting cross-legged on my living room floor, organizing printed programs for the gala, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Natalie Torres? The voice was smooth, professional, with a faint British accent. Yes, this is she. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm calling on behalf of Dominic Ashford. He's reviewed your portfolio for Voices Unframed and would like to discuss a potential collaboration. Would you have time for a call tomorrow afternoon? I blinked, my brain struggling to process the words. Dominic Ashford. The Dominic Ashford. Tech innovator turned eco-luxury hotel mogul, philanthropist, and one of the wealthiest under 40 entrepreneurs in the country. I'd read articles about his work in sustainable architecture and his foundation's focus on arts education, but I'd never imagined he'd even heard of me, let alone reviewed my work. I'm sorry, I said slowly. Can you repeat that? Marcus chuckled lightly. Dominic has been following your program for several months. He's impressed by your model and thinks there may be synergy with his foundation's upcoming initiatives. He'd like to speak with you directly. I looked around my tiny apartment, at the half-packed boxes and printed programs scattered across the floor, and felt something shift. Not hope exactly. More like possibility. Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Tomorrow works. After the call ended, I sat in the quiet for a long time. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post about it. I just let the information sit, like a seed planted in soil that hadn't seen rain in years. The next day, the video call with Dominic Ashford lasted 2 hours. He wasn't what I expected. No corporate stiffness, no performative charm. He asked specific questions about my artists, about the barriers they faced, about how I structured mentorship without replicating the same exclusionary systems I was trying to dismantle. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it was thoughtful, direct. Toward the end of the call, he leaned back in his chair and smiled slightly. I'll be attending the Belmont Gala, he said. I'm one of their primary donors. I'd like to see your work in person. And if it's as good as I think it will be, I'd like to discuss a longer-term partnership. I nodded, keeping my expression calm even though my heart was racing. I'd welcome that. Good, he said. Then he paused, his gaze sharpening slightly. Natalie, I've been doing this long enough to recognize when someone's building something real versus performing for investors. You're the former. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The call ended, and I sat staring at the blank screen, his words echoing in my mind. 3 days before the gala, I was finishing final arrangements when my phone lit up with a notification. Crystal had posted on social media. It was a photo of her and Blake on a yacht in Miami, champagne glasses raised, caption reading, "Sometimes you have to choose yourself. Saying no to obligations that don't serve your energy. Growth mindset." The comments were full of praise. Absolutely queen energy. Setting boundaries is self-care. You deserve this. I scrolled past it without reacting. I didn't comment. I didn't send a message. I just closed the app and went back to work. But that night, lying in bed, I let myself imagine one thing. Walking into that ballroom in my emerald dress. Not looking for my family in the crowd. Not scanning for their approval. Just walking in as myself, surrounded by people who'd chosen to be there, with a man who'd seen my work and called it real. And for the first time in months, that image didn't feel like a fantasy. It felt like a plan. The morning light felt different when I woke up 2 days before the gala. Not softer or harsher, just present in a way that made everything sharper. I'd slept poorly, waking every few hours to check my phone for messages that never came. My family's silence had become its own kind of noise, filling the space where support should have been. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, reviewing the final checklist for Aspen. Transportation confirmed. Hotel rooms secured. Artist arrival times coordinated. The programs were printed and packed. The centerpiece installations had shipped yesterday and were already being assembled at the venue. Everything was falling into place except for the one thing I'd wanted most. My phone buzzed. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking maybe my mother had reconsidered, maybe my father had finally replied. But it was just Kira sending a photo of her outfit for the gala, a sleek black jumpsuit with silver threading. "Ready to watch you shine," her message read. I smiled, genuinely this time, and typed back a quick thank you. Then I opened my email to handle some last-minute vendor questions. That's when I saw it. An email notification from the airline, sent at 3:47 in the morning. Subject line, "Itinerary change confirmation." My stomach dropped before I even opened it. The email detailed a modification to the booking I'd made for Crystal and Blake. Their tickets from Miami to Aspen had been canceled and rebooked. New destination, Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Same dates. Same first-class seats. But the confirmation number had changed, and under the modification section, it listed the person who'd made the change, Blake Morrison. I sat frozen, staring at the screen. They hadn't just decided not to come. They'd taken the tickets I'd paid for, the ones I'd carefully selected and confirmed, and redirected them to a vacation. My money. My invitation. Repurposed without a word. I checked my credit card account, hands trembling slightly. There it was. A refund processed, then an immediate rebooking charge. The funds I'd spent had been converted into their luxury weekend getaway, and they hadn't even bothered to tell me. I stood up from the table, pacing the length of my small kitchen. The logical part of my brain tried to find explanations. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Blake had accidentally clicked the wrong booking. But I knew better. This wasn't an error. This was calculated. I opened my text messages and scrolled to the family group chat. My last message still sat there, the one asking them to confirm receipt of the flight details. Still no response from Crystal or my father. Just my mother's single heart reaction from a week ago. I typed out a message, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. I just got a notification that the tickets were changed. Can someone explain what's happening? I hit send and watched the 3 dots appear immediately under my mother's name. Then they disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, a response came through. "Oh honey, I'm sure it's just a mix-up with the airline. You know how these things go. Before I could reply, Crystal's message popped up. Relax. Blake needed to use the miles for a work thing. You'll get reimbursed eventually. I read it twice, then a third time. Reimbursed eventually. As if $35,000 was something she could just promise to pay back someday, casually, whenever it was convenient. I didn't respond. Instead, I called the airline directly. The hold music played for 12 minutes before a representative picked up. How can I assist you today? I need information about a booking modification, I said, keeping my voice steady. Confirmation number. I rattled off the digits from my original email. There was typing on the other end, then a pause. Yes, I see the booking here. It was modified 2 days ago by the secondary account holder listed on the reservation. The original routing was changed, and the flight credits were applied to a new destination. Can you tell me if there's any way to reverse that? Another pause. Unfortunately, once a modification is processed by an authorized user on the account, the original itinerary is voided. The tickets were non-refundable, but the value was transferred. There's no reversal option available at this point. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I sat on the edge of my couch and stared at the wall. The betrayal wasn't just that they weren't coming. It was that they'd actively stolen from me and dressed it up like a minor inconvenience. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements, scrolling back through the past 6 months. There it was, transaction after transaction. The deposit I'd made to cover Crystal's car repairs last year when she'd called me crying about not having enough in her account. The payment I'd sent my parents when my father's business had a slow quarter and he couldn't make his mortgage. The $500 I'd wired to Crystal when she'd said her credit card was maxed and she needed help with her daughter's preschool tuition. None of it had been paid back. None of it had even been acknowledged after the initial thank you text. I'd spent years being the financial safety net for people who saw me as less than them. The realization settled heavy in my chest, but it didn't break me. It clarified something I'd been avoiding. That afternoon, I went to meet Dr. Helen Ortega, my former professor and one of the people I'd invited to the gala. She'd been my mentor during graduate school, the one who'd encouraged me to pursue arts advocacy instead of corporate marketing. We met at a small coffee shop near the university, and she hugged me the moment she saw me. Natalie, you look exhausted, she said gently, studying my face. I'm fine, I lied, then immediately reconsidered. Actually, no. I'm not fine. We sat down, and I told her everything. The tickets. The cancellations. The screenshot Crystal had shared mocking my work. The way my parents had dismissed the gala as if it were a hobby instead of the culmination of years of effort. Dr. Ortega listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to something harder. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You know what this is, don't you? She asked quietly. What? Permission. Permission to stop performing for an audience that will never applaud. Her words hit me like cold water. I nodded slowly, blinking back the tears I'd been holding since that morning. I keep thinking maybe I didn't explain it well enough, I said. Maybe if I'd just, stop, Dr. Ortega interrupted firmly. This isn't about you not being enough. This is about them choosing not to see you. And that's their loss, not yours. I left the coffee shop an hour later feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because someone had finally validated what I'd been feeling. Heavier because I knew what I had to do next. That evening, I sat at my desk and opened the shared family cloud account we'd used for years to store photos, documents, holiday plans. I scrolled through folders filled with images from birthdays, graduations, vacations. In every single one, Crystal was front and center. My parents flanked her in group shots, arms around her shoulders, eyes bright with pride. And in the back, sometimes cropped half out of frame, was me. I downloaded the few photos where I actually appeared fully, then I removed my access from the account entirely. I didn't delete anything. I just stopped being part of the archive. Next, I opened my banking app and changed my security settings so no one could request funds or see my account activity. Then I blocked Crystal and Blake from my payment apps. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. I couldn't keep being their emergency fund while they turned my generosity into their vacation budget. My phone buzzed. Another text from Crystal in the family group chat. Mom said you're upset about the ticket thing. Honestly, Natalie, you're being dramatic. It's not that deep. We'll figure it out later. I stared at the message for a long moment, then I did something I'd never done before. I left the group chat. No explanation. No final message. I just pressed the button and watched the conversation disappear from my screen. Within 5 minutes, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. Then a text. Why did you leave the chat? This is so childish. Call me. I turned off my phone and set it face down on the counter. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, but it was mine. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and a string of text messages that had come through after I'd finally turned my phone back on around midnight. Most were from my mother, each one escalating in tone from confused to frustrated to accusatory. I don't understand why you're doing this. Your sister is really hurt. This is not how we raised you. You're tearing this family apart over nothing. There was one message from my father, short and blunt. Grow up. And then, buried in the middle of it all, a message from Crystal that made my blood run cold. You know what, Natalie? You've always been jealous. Always trying to compete when you don't even belong in the same league. That charity thing you're doing? It's embarrassing. You're embarrassing. I tried to protect you by not showing up, but sure, go ahead and humiliate yourself in front of real professionals. Just don't expect me to clean up the mess. I read it 3 times. Then I screenshot it. Then I saved it to a secure folder on my laptop. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. I just documented it and moved on. Later that morning, I met with Victoria Ross, a lawyer I'd consulted a few months ago when I was setting up the formal structure for Voices Unframed. She'd helped me navigate nonprofit paperwork and contracts, and she'd become something of a friend in the process. Natalie, she said, leaning back in her office chair. Tell me what's going on. I laid out the situation. The tickets. The rebooking. The messages. The pattern of financial manipulation over the years. Victoria listened, taking notes, her expression growing sharper with each detail. Do you want to pursue this legally? She asked when I finished. I hesitated. I don't know. I just want to make sure they can't do it again. She nodded. Here's what I recommend. We draft a formal cease and desist regarding any future use of your financial accounts or credit. We also document the ticket situation in case they try to claim you owe them money later. And if they show up at your event uninvited, we have grounds for removal based on prior conflict. You think they'd show up? I asked. Victoria raised an eyebrow. People like this don't like losing control. If they think you're moving on without them, they'll try to insert themselves back into the narrative. Better to be prepared. I left her office with a folder full of documents and a plan. For the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't just reacting. I was building a boundary. That afternoon, I received an email from Marcus Chin, Dominic Ashford's assistant. Dominic wanted me to reach out and confirm he'll be attending the gala. He's looking forward to seeing the installations and meeting your artists in person. He also wanted to know if you'd join him for dinner the evening before the event. Nothing formal, just an opportunity to discuss the potential partnership in a quieter setting. I read the email twice, my heart beating faster. Dinner with Dominic Ashford. The man who'd built an empire on innovation and ethics, who'd donated millions to arts education, who'd somehow found my work in the noise of 1,000 other programs. I replied carefully, professionally, agreeing to the dinner and suggesting a restaurant in Aspen I'd researched for its quiet ambience and excellent food. His response came within an hour. Perfect. Looking forward to it. That night, I packed my suitcase for Aspen. I folded the emerald dress carefully between layers of tissue paper. I packed the printed programs, the thank you gifts from my artists, the notes I'd prepared for my speech. And at the bottom of my bag, tucked into a side pocket, I placed the folder Victoria had given me. Just in case. I sat on my bed, looking around my small apartment. This place had been my refuge for 3 years, the first space I'd ever lived in that felt entirely mine. No family photos on the walls. No borrowed furniture. Just my books, my art, my life. And tomorrow, I'd walk into a ballroom in Aspen, not as someone's overlooked sister or dismissed daughter, but as the founder of something real. Something I'd built with my own hands and my own vision. My phone buzzed one more time. Another message from my mother. I really think you're overreacting. Can we please talk about this like adults? I turned off my phone, slid it into my bag, and went to bed. The next morning, I boarded my flight to Aspen alone. No family waiting at the gate. No last-minute apologies or reconciliations. Just me, my carry-on, and the quiet certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. As the plane lifted off, I looked out the window at Austin growing smaller below me. Somewhere down there, my family was going about their day, probably not thinking about me at all. And for the first time, that didn't hurt. It just felt like freedom. When I landed in Aspen 3 hours later, the mountain air hit me like clarity. Crisp, cold, sharp enough to wake up parts of me that had been numb for months. I collected my luggage and took a car to the hotel, a beautiful lodge-style building with exposed timber beams and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the peaks. Kira was already checked in. She met me in the lobby with a hug that nearly knocked me over. "You made it," she said, pulling back to look at me. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," I said. And I meant it. We spent the afternoon doing a final walkthrough at the Belmont Foundation venue. The ballroom was stunning, all vaulted ceilings and chandeliers that looked like frozen starlight. My artists' installations were already in place, and seeing them displayed so prominently made my throat tighten with pride. One of my ments, a young painter named Josie who'd grown up in foster care, stood in front of her piece, a massive canvas depicting hands reaching toward light. She turned when she heard me approach, her eyes bright. "Natalie, I can't believe this is real," she whispered. "You made it real," I told her. "This is your work. Your vision. You earned this." She hugged me, and I felt something settle into place. This was why I'd started Voices Unframed. Not for recognition. Not to prove anything to my family. But for moments like this, where someone who'd been told they didn't matter could stand in a room full of power and know they belonged. That evening, I got ready for dinner with Dominic Ashford. I chose a simple black dress, understated but elegant, and pulled my hair into a low twist. I wasn't trying to impress him. I just wanted to show up as myself. The restaurant was intimate, tucked into a quiet corner of Aspen's historic district. Dominic was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, dressed casually in a dark sweater and jeans. He stood when he saw me, offering a warm smile. "Natalie. Thank you for making time." We sat, and for the first 2 hours, we talked about everything except business. He asked about my path to arts advocacy, about the moment I'd realized corporate work wasn't fulfilling, about the first artist I'd ever mentored. He listened with the kind of attention that made me feel like my words actually mattered. Eventually, the conversation shifted. "I've been following your work longer than you know," Dominic said, setting down his wine glass. "I saw a feature on Voices Unframed about 8 months ago in a small arts journal. The way you structured the program, removing barriers instead of adding hoops, it reminded me why I started my foundation in the first place." "Why did you?" I asked. He smiled slightly. "Because I got lucky. Right place, right time, right idea. And I watched too many brilliant people get overlooked because they didn't have the right last name or the right connections. I don't believe in wasting talent." "Neither do I," said quietly. He leaned forward slightly. "Tomorrow night, when people see what you've built, they're going to want a piece of it. Investors, board members, other foundations. My advice? Be selective. Not everyone who offers support actually supports your vision. Some just want to attach their name to something that makes them look good. I nodded, absorbing his words. And for what it's worth, he added, his tone softening, I think what you've done is extraordinary. Not because it's flashy, but because it's real. We finished dinner around 10, and he walked me back to my hotel. At the entrance, he paused. I'll see you tomorrow night, he said. And Natalie, whatever happens in that room, don't let anyone make you feel small. You've earned your place. I thanked him and headed inside, his words echoing in my mind as I rode the elevator to my floor. Back in my room, I checked my phone. There were 3 new messages from my mother, all variations of the same plea for me to stop being stubborn and call her. One message from Crystal and Cutting. Hope your little art show goes well. Try not to embarrass yourself. I turned off my phone, climbed into bed, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that ballroom. And for the first time in my life, I wouldn't be looking for my family's approval. I'd be standing in my own light. The morning of the gala arrived with snow dusting the mountain peaks outside my hotel window. I woke early, not from anxiety but from anticipation. The kind that hums in your chest when you know something significant is about to unfold. I ordered room service, ate slowly, and let myself enjoy the quiet before the storm of the evening ahead. Kira knocked on my door around 10 with coffee and pastries she'd grabbed from the lobby. We sat cross-legged on my bed, going over the timeline one more time. Artist arrivals at 2. Press check-in at 4. Doors open at 6. My welcome remarks at 7:15, right after the foundation director's opening speech. You nervous? Kira asked, watching me over the rim of her coffee cup. No, I said, surprised by my own certainty. I'm ready. She smiled, something knowing in her expression. Good. Because you're about to remind a lot of people why they should have been paying attention all along. By noon, I was at the venue overseeing final setup. The installations looked even more stunning in daylight, each piece positioned to catch the natural light pouring through the massive windows. Josie and 3 other artists had arrived early, their nervous energy filling the space with excitement. I spent an hour walking them through the layout, introducing them to the foundation staff, making sure they felt prepared for the questions they'd inevitably face from donors and press. Dr. Ortega arrived shortly after, her presence grounding me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. She pulled me aside near one of the installations, a sculpture made from reclaimed materials by an artist who'd been homeless 2 years ago. How are you really doing? She asked, her tone gentle but direct. Better than I expected, I admitted. I thought I'd spend today looking at my phone, waiting for them to reach out. But I haven't checked it once. She squeezed my shoulder. That's growth. You're not waiting for permission to be proud anymore. Around 3, I returned to the hotel to get ready. The emerald dress hung waiting, and when I slipped into it, I felt something shift. Not transformation exactly, more like recognition. This was who I'd been becoming all along, I'd just been too busy seeking approval to notice. I kept my makeup simple, hair swept to one side, diamond studs I'd inherited from my grandmother the only jewelry I wore. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see someone trying to prove anything. I saw someone who already had. My phone sat on the dresser, still powered off from the night before. I picked it up, held it for a moment, then set it back down. Whatever messages waited there could wait longer. Tonight wasn't about them. I arrived at the venue at 5:30. The energy had completely transformed from the quiet setup of the morning. Staff moved with purpose, adjusting lighting and sound. The catering team arranged champagne flutes on silver trays. Photographers tested angles near the entrance. And in the center of it all, my artists stood in small clusters, dressed in their finest, faces glowing with anticipation. Marcus Chen found me near the main gallery entrance. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with an easy confidence that put people at ease. Natalie, everything looks incredible, he said, gesturing to the installations. Dominic's going to be blown away. Is he here yet? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He'll arrive right before doors open. He prefers to avoid the pre-event chaos. Marcus smiled. But he wanted me to give you this. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. Thank you for letting me be part of tonight. What you've built matters more than you know. Looking forward to celebrating you. Dominic. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into my clutch, warmth spreading through my chest. By 6, guests began arriving. Foundation board members, local philanthropists, art collectors, business leaders. The room filled with the sound of conversation and clinking glasses. I positioned myself near the entrance, greeting people, introducing my artists, watching their work receive the attention it deserved. Then Dominic arrived. He walked in without fanfare, no entourage or announcement, just Marcus at his side and a quiet confidence that somehow commanded attention anyway. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit, his presence understated but undeniable. When his eyes found mine across the room, he smiled and made his way over. Natalie, he said, taking my hand briefly. This is extraordinary. Thank you for coming, I replied, meaning it more than he could know. I wouldn't have missed it. He glanced around the room, taking in the installations, the artists mingling with guests, the energy humming through the space. You've created something rare here. Authenticity in a world that usually trades in performance. Before I could respond, the foundation director stepped to the podium at the front of the room, calling for everyone's attention. I excused myself and moved toward the side of the stage, my heart beginning to race. The director spoke about the foundation's mission, the importance of supporting emerging voices, the power of art to transform communities. Then she turned toward me. Tonight, we're honored to spotlight a program that embodies everything we believe in. Voices Unframed, founded by Natalie Torres, has created pathways for artists who've been systematically excluded from traditional gallery spaces. Natalie, would you join me? I walked to the podium, aware of every eye in the room but steadied by the faces I recognized. Kira near the back, grinning. Dr. Ortega in the third row, nodding encouragement. My artists scattered throughout the crowd, their presence reminding me why I'd started this in the first place. I began speaking, my voice clear and steady. I talked about the barriers that keep talented artists invisible. About the belief that art should only be accessible to those who can afford the right education or the right connections. About the 15 artists in this room who'd proven that talent doesn't require privilege, just opportunity. The room was silent, listening. I could feel the weight of attention, but it didn't crush me. It lifted me. When I finished, the applause was immediate and genuine. People stood. I saw donors pulling out their phones, likely already thinking about how to get involved. Gallery owners approached my artists with business cards. And in the middle of it all, Dominic stood with his arms crossed, watching me with something that looked like respect. The rest of the evening unfolded in a blur of conversations and connections. A tech entrepreneur wanted to fund scholarships. A gallery owner offered exhibition space. A journalist asked for an interview about the program's model. Every person I spoke to saw what I'd built as legitimate, valuable, worth investing in. Around 8:30, I finally had a moment to breathe. I stepped onto a side terrace overlooking the mountains, the cold air sharp against my skin. The gala continued inside, music and laughter drifting through the doors, but out here it was quiet. Hiding or recharging? I turned to find Dominic standing in the doorway, 2 champagne flutes in his hands. He offered me one and stepped out to join me. Recharging, I said, accepting the glass. It's been a lot. Good lot or overwhelming lot? Both. He nodded, leaning against the railing beside me. You handled it well. That speech wasn't just informative, it was honest. People respond to that. I wasn't sure they would, I admitted. I kept thinking someone would stand up and ask why they should care about artists they've never heard of. That's the point though, isn't it? Dominic said, turning to look at me. You're giving them a reason to care. You're not asking for charity, you're showing them what they've been missing. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the mountains stretching dark and vast before us. Can I ask you something? I said finally. Of course. Why did you really reach out? There are hundreds of programs like mine. What made you notice? Dominic considered the question, swirling his champagne thoughtfully. About a year ago, I attended a gala not unlike this one. Lots of money, lots of speeches about impact, but when I asked the organizers to name one artist they'd actually helped, they couldn't. It was all optics, no substance. Then I came across an article about your program. Small publication, barely any reach. But the way you talked about removing barriers instead of creating new ones, the way you centered the artists instead of yourself, it reminded me that real work doesn't always come with publicity. Sometimes it's just someone caring enough to build something that actually helps. I felt my throat tighten. Thank you for seeing that. I think a lot of people are about to see it, he said. Then he turned to face me fully, his expression growing more serious. Natalie, I want to discuss a formal partnership. Not just funding, but infrastructure support. Legal resources, marketing reach, connections to galleries and collectors. I want to help you scale this without losing what makes it work. I stared at him, the magnitude of the offer settling over me. This was what I'd been working toward for years. Validation not just of my effort but of my vision. I'd need to maintain creative control, I said carefully. And the artists would need to retain ownership of their work and their stories. Absolutely, Dominic agreed without hesitation. This would be your program, your terms. I'm just offering resources to amplify what you've already built. I nodded slowly, my mind already racing with possibilities. Then yes. I'd like to explore that. He smiled, genuine and warm. Good. We'll set up a meeting next week to go over details. He paused, then added, and for what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't let whatever personal challenges you were dealing with stop you from being here tonight. A lot of people would have cancelled. I looked at him, wondering how much Marcus had told him about my situation. How did you know I was dealing with something? I didn't, not specifically. But I'd been doing this long enough to recognize when someone's building despite obstacles rather than because everything's easy. It shows in the work. Before I could respond, Kira appeared in the doorway. Natalie, sorry to interrupt, but there's a reporter from Arts Quarterly who wants to talk to you about featuring Voices Unframed in their spring issue. I glanced at Dominic, who gestured toward the door. Go. This is your night. I followed Kira back inside, but I carried his words with me like a torch in the dark. The rest of the evening passed in a whirlwind of interviews, photographs, and conversations that would have seemed impossible a week ago. By the time the gala officially ended around 11, my feet ached and my voice was hoarse, but I felt more alive than I had in months. Kira, Dr. Ortega, and I gathered near the coat check, exhausted but exhilarated. My artists had already left, their contact information collected by more gallery owners and collectors than I could count. The installations would remain on display for another week, giving even more people the chance to see what we'd built. You did it, Kira said, pulling me into a hug. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected. None of this happens without the people who believed it mattered. Dr. Ortega smiled, her eyes bright. This is just the beginning, Natalie. You know that, right? I nodded, feeling the truth of it settling into my bones. As we walked toward the exit, I finally turned my phone back on. The screen lit up with notifications, dozens of them. Messages from my mother, increasingly frantic. Messages from Crystal, vacillating between accusatory and dismissive. One from my father, just 3 words. This is childish. I scrolled through them without opening any, then I saw something else. A notification from social media. Someone had tagged me in a post. I opened it. It was a photo from tonight, taken by one of the guests. In it, I stood at the podium mid-speech, the gallery installations visible behind me, the audience's attention focused entirely on me. The caption read, "When someone builds something real, you can feel it in the room. Honored to witness Natalie Torres and Voices Unframed tonight. This is what meaningful work looks like. The post had been shared 47 times already. Comments poured in from people I'd never met, praising the program, asking how to get involved, tagging friends who worked in arts funding. I screenshot the post, not out of vanity but as evidence. Evidence that I'd been right to keep going. Evidence that the work mattered regardless of who showed up to see it. Then I did something I'd been avoiding all day. I opened my photos and found the screenshot I'd taken of Crystal's message. The one where she'd called my work embarrassing, where she'd said I didn't belong in the same league as her. I didn't post it. I didn't send it to anyone. I just looked at it for a long moment, letting the contrast speak for itself. Then I deleted it. Not because I was letting go of the hurt, but because I didn't need to carry proof of her cruelty anymore. Tonight had proven everything I needed to know. Back at the hotel, I changed into comfortable clothes and sat by the window, looking out at the mountains silhouetted against the night sky. My phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. Congratulations on a remarkable evening. Get some rest. Tomorrow we celebrate properly. I smiled and set the phone aside. Tomorrow would bring new conversations, new opportunities, new challenges. But tonight, I let myself just sit in the quiet satisfaction of having done something that mattered, surrounded by people who'd chosen to witness it, unburdened by the weight of those who hadn't. Somewhere in Miami, Crystal was probably posting photos of her Cabo vacation, blissfully unaware that tonight had happened at all. Somewhere in Scottsdale, my parents were likely discussing how I'd overreacted, how I'd always been too sensitive, how I'd made a scene over nothing. But here in Aspen, in this moment, none of that touched me. I'd stopped waiting for them to see me. And in doing so, I'd finally seen myself. The morning after the gala, I woke to sunlight streaming through the hotel curtains and the soft buzz of my phone on the nightstand. For a moment, I just lay there, letting the memory of the previous night wash over me. The applause. The conversations. The way Dominic had looked at me like I was someone worth investing in, not because of my last name or connections, but because of what I'd built with my own hands. I reached for my phone and saw the notifications had multiplied overnight. The Arts Quarterly article was already live, featuring photos from the gala and quotes from donors who'd committed funding. My inbox held requests from 3 more galleries, 2 podcast hosts wanting interviews, and an invitation to speak at a women's entrepreneurship summit in Denver next month. Then I saw the other messages. 23 texts from my mother. 12 from Crystal. 3 more from my father, each one shorter and sharper than the last. I opened my mother's messages first, scanning through them quickly. Why are you ignoring us? This is so hurtful, Natalie. Your sister showed me some article about your event. Why didn't you tell us it was such a big deal? We could have been there if you just communicated better. People are asking me why we weren't there and I don't know what to say. The last message had come through at 2 a.m. You're making us look bad on purpose. This is cruel. I set the phone down and took a long breath. Even now, even after everything, they were rewriting the narrative. I hadn't communicated well enough. I'd made them look bad. It was my fault they'd stolen my tickets and mocked my work. I opened Crystal's messages next, bracing myself. So you think you're a big deal now? Mom's crying because you won't talk to her. You're being selfish and you know it. Then, buried in the middle, something that made my blood run cold. Blake and I are flying to Aspen today. We need to talk about this in person. You can't just cut us out. I checked the timestamp. The message had been sent 4 hours ago. My heart rate spiked. I immediately called the front desk. This is Natalie Torres in room 412. I need to speak with security about restricting access to my room. The woman on the other end was professional and calm. Of course, Ms. Torres. Can you provide names of individuals who should not be granted access? I gave her Crystal's name, Blake's name, and my parents' names for good measure. Then I called Victoria Ross, my lawyer. It was early, but she answered on the 3rd ring. Natalie, I saw the coverage from last night. Congratulations. Thank you, but I need your help. My sister just texted that she's flying here today. I don't want them anywhere near me. Victoria's tone shifted immediately to business mode. Do you still have that cease and desist we drafted? Yes. Good. Forward me her text message right now. If they show up at your hotel or the venue, you have grounds for enforcement. I'll also draft a formal trespass notice for the hotel to serve if necessary. Within 15 minutes, she'd sent me a document to show hotel security. Within 30, the hotel manager personally called my room to confirm they'd flagged my file and would not allow anyone not explicitly approved by me to access my floor or receive information about my stay. I felt the tension in my shoulders ease slightly. I was learning to protect myself in ways I'd never had to before. Around 10, I met Dominic for brunch at a restaurant tucked into the base of the mountain. The space was intimate, with exposed stone walls and large windows overlooking the slopes. He was already there when I arrived, reading something on his tablet, a cup of black coffee at his elbow. Good morning, he said, standing as I approached. Sleep well? Better than expected, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. We ordered food and spent the first part of the meal discussing logistics for the partnership. He had his legal team ready to draft an agreement that would provide funding, infrastructure support, and access to his network of galleries and collectors, all while keeping creative control firmly in my hands. I want to make sure this doesn't change what makes Voices Unframed work, he said, leaning back against the booth. The moment you start answering to investors instead of artists, you lose the integrity that drew people in. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, I admitted. Scaling without selling out. It's possible, Dominic assured me. But it requires being selective about who you let into the room. Not everyone who offers money has good intentions. We talked through potential structures, timelines, goals. He listened more than he directed, asking questions designed to help me clarify my own vision rather than imposing his. By the time our food arrived, I felt like I was talking to a true partner, not someone trying to take over. Can I ask you something personal? I said, setting down my fork. Go ahead. Why does this matter to you? You've already built an empire. You could spend the rest of your life just maintaining what you have. Why invest time in something like my program? Dominic was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. My parents were immigrants. My father worked in a factory, my mother cleaned houses. I got lucky with timing and an idea that caught fire, but I've never forgotten that most brilliant people never get the chance I got. Not because they're less talented, but because the doors are locked and they don't have the keys. He met my eyes. Programs like yours are giving people keys. That matters more than another hotel or another tech investment. I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't philanthropy as performance. It was personal. Thank you, I said quietly. For seeing that. Thank you for building it, he replied. We were finishing our meal when Dominic's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression tightening slightly. Marcus just texted. There's a situation at your hotel. My stomach dropped. What kind of situation? He showed me the message. 2 individuals claiming to be your family are in the lobby demanding access to your room. Hotel security is managing it, but Marcus thought you should know. I felt heat rise in my face, not from embarrassment but from anger I'd been holding back for days. They actually came. Do you want me to go with you? Dominic asked, his tone serious. I shook my head. No. This is my mess to handle. It's not a mess, he corrected gently. And you don't have to handle it alone. Something in his voice steadied me. Okay. Yes. Come with me. We drove back to the hotel in his car, a sleek black SUV that probably cost more than I'd made in the past 3 years. The ride was quiet, but his presence beside me felt grounding rather than intrusive. When we arrived at the hotel, I could see Crystal and Blake in the lobby before they saw me. Crystal was dressed like she'd come straight from a resort, white linen pants and oversized sunglasses pushed up on her head, her voice carrying across the marble floors as she argued with the front desk manager. I'm her sister. You can't seriously tell me I can't see my own family. The manager, a composed woman in her 50s, remained calm. Ma'am, as I've explained, Ms. Torres has requested privacy, and we're honoring that request. Crystal's eyes landed on me as I walked through the entrance, and her expression shifted from frustration to something harder. There she is. Natalie, tell them this is ridiculous. I stopped several feet away, Dominic standing quietly beside me. No. You're not welcome here. Blake stepped forward, his tone attempting reasonableness. Come on, Nat. We just want to talk. Clear the air. There's nothing to clear, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. You took the tickets I paid for and used them for your own vacation. You mocked my work. You made it clear you think what I do is embarrassing. So no, we're not going to talk. Crystal's face flushed. You're really going to do this? Make a scene in public? I'm not making a scene, I said calmly. You are. I asked you not to come. You came anyway. That's on you. We're your family, Crystal hissed, her voice dropping lower but losing none of its edge. You can't just erase us because your feelings got hurt. This isn't about hurt feelings, I replied. This is about boundaries. You don't get to treat me like I'm worthless and then demand access when it's convenient for you. Blake glanced at Dominic, clearly noting his expensive clothes and the way he stood close to me, protective but not overbearing. Who's this? Your new rich friend you're using to make us jealous? Dominic spoke for the first time, his tone polite but cold. I'm someone who respects Natalie enough not to steal from her. Crystal's eyes widened, then narrowed. Excuse me? The tickets, I said. You rerouted them to Cabo. That's theft. And I have documentation, along with legal counsel who's very interested in pursuing it if necessary. Crystal laughed, but it sounded forced. You're going to sue your own sister? Over plane tickets? God, you've really lost it. I'm not suing anyone, I said. I'm just making sure you understand there are consequences for treating people badly. Even when those people are family. The hotel manager stepped forward. Ms. Morrison, Mr. Morrison, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the property. If you refuse, we'll contact local authorities. Blake grabbed Crystal's arm. Come on. This isn't worth it. But Crystal jerked away from him, her eyes locked on mine. You think you're so much better than me now? Because some rich guy is paying attention to you and you threw a party for wannabe artists? I think I'm done letting you make me feel small, I said quietly. That's all. She stared at me for a long moment, something flickering across her face that might have been hurt or might have been rage. Then she turned sharply and walked toward the exit, Blake following behind her, muttering apologies to the staff as he went. I watched them leave, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. When the doors closed behind them, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Dominic touched my elbow lightly. You okay? Yeah, I said, and meant it. I'm okay. The hotel manager approached with a concerned expression. Ms. Torres, I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. We'll make sure they're flagged permanently. They won't be able to return. Thank you, I said. I appreciate how you handled it. Dominic and I took the elevator up to my floor in silence. When we reached my room, he paused at the door. Do you want company, or do you need space? I considered for a moment. Company. Just for a little while. We sat in the small sitting area by the window, the mountains stretching endlessly beyond the glass. I felt drained but also oddly lighter, like I'd been carrying something heavy and finally set it down. That couldn't have been easy, Dominic said after a while. It wasn't, I admitted. But it was necessary. He nodded. For what it's worth, you handled it with more grace than most people would have managed. I didn't feel graceful. I felt angry. You can be both, he said simply. We sat quietly for a while, and then he asked, "What do you need right now?" I thought about it. What I needed was to stop letting my family's chaos dictate my emotional state. What I needed was to focus on what actually mattered. "I need to check on my artists," I said. "Make sure they got home okay and that they have the connections they need to follow up with the people they met last night." Dominic smiled. "That sounds exactly right." He left shortly after, giving me space to make my calls and send my emails. I spent the next 2 hours reaching out to every artist who'd participated, celebrating their wins, troubleshooting their concerns, making sure they knew this was just the beginning. By the time I finished, my phone had stopped buzzing with messages from my family. Either they'd given up, or they were regrouping. I didn't particularly care which. That evening, I met Kira and Dr. Ortega for dinner at a quiet bistro in town. We toasted with wine and talked about everything except my family. The partnership with Dominic's foundation. The media coverage. The gallery inquiries. The future that was unfolding faster than I'd ever imagined. "You know what strikes me most about all this?" Dr. Ortega said, swirling her wine thoughtfully. "You didn't wait for permission. You didn't wait to be discovered. You just built something worth noticing. And now people are noticing," Kira added, grinning. "Including a certain billionaire philanthropist who can't seem to stop looking at you like you're the most interesting person in any room." I felt my face warm. "He's just being supportive." "Sure," Kira said, her tone teasing. "Supportive. That's definitely the word for how he looked at you this morning." I laughed despite myself, and for the first time in weeks, it felt genuine. Later that night, back in my room, I finally allowed myself to look at the photos from the gala that had been posted online. There were dozens of them. Me at the podium. Me with my artists. Me standing beside Dominic, both of us looking at one of the installations, his expression thoughtful, mine proud. I saved one photo in particular. It showed me mid-laugh, surrounded by people who'd chosen to show up, my face lit with genuine joy. No performance. No pretense. Just me, fully present in a moment I'd earned. I posted it with a simple caption. "Grateful for everyone who believed this work mattered. Here's to building spaces where everyone belongs." Within minutes, comments poured in. "Congratulations." "Inspiration." "Beautiful work." Then, buried among them, a comment from an account I didn't recognize at first. When I clicked on it, I realized it was one of Crystal's friends from the real estate world. "Some of us see through the performance. Enjoy your 15 minutes. I stared at it for a moment, then did something I never would have done before. I deleted it. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't deserve space in this moment. My phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. "Beautiful photo. That's the Natalie I met on our first call. Glad the world is finally catching up." I smiled and typed back. "Thank you for helping make tonight possible." His response came quickly. "You made it possible. I just showed up." I set my phone down and walked to the window one last time, looking out at the mountains dark against the starlit sky. Somewhere out there, Crystal was probably furious. My parents were probably confused about why I wouldn't just let it go and move on like I always had. But I wasn't that person anymore. I'd spent years making myself smaller to fit into their idea of who I should be, and it had never been enough. Now I was building something that didn't require their approval. Something that mattered whether they saw it or not. And that felt like the truest version of freedom I'd ever known. 3 weeks after returning from Aspen, I sat in my Austin apartment surrounded by contract documents, partnership proposals, and a calendar so full it barely resembled the quiet life I'd been living just a month ago. The shift had been seismic. Arts Quarterly had published their feature with a cover photo of one of my artists standing beside her work, the headline reading, "Redefining Access: How Voices Unframed is Changing Who Gets to Be an Artist." Within days, my inbox had exploded with inquiries from foundations, universities, and individual donors wanting to support the program. Dominic's legal team had drafted a partnership agreement that was more generous than anything I could have negotiated alone. $50,000 in immediate operational funding, access to 3 gallery spaces across his hotel properties, and a commitment to feature emerging artists in rotating exhibitions. Most importantly, the contract explicitly stated that all creative decisions remained mine, all artist revenues stayed with the artists, and the program's mission could not be altered without my approval. I'd read the contract 4 times with Victoria Ross before signing, looking for catches or hidden clauses that would compromise what I'd built. There were none. It was exactly what Dominic had promised, a true partnership designed to amplify rather than absorb. The day I signed the papers, Kira came over with champagne and Thai food. We sat on my living room floor like we'd done in college, laughing about how impossible this would have seemed a year ago. "You know what the best part is?" Kira said, pouring us each a glass. "Your family has no idea how big this has gotten." I'd thought about that often over the past few weeks. After the confrontation in Aspen, I'd blocked Crystal's number and filtered my parents' messages to a folder I checked once a week, if that. The silence from my end had apparently infuriated them, based on the increasingly aggressive voicemails my mother left before I blocked her too. "They'll find out eventually," I said. "Someone will send them an article or they'll see something online." "And what will you do when they reach out trying to reconnect?" Kira asked, watching me carefully. I considered the question. A month ago, I might have softened, might have let them back in with carefully managed boundaries and guarded optimism. Now, I just felt tired at the thought. "Nothing," I said finally. "I'll do nothing. They made their choice. This is mine." 2 days later, I was proved right about them finding out. Dr. Ortega forwarded me an email from a colleague at the university where my mother volunteered on an alumni board. The colleague had sent my mother a link to the Arts Quarterly article, saying, "Your daughter is doing incredible work. You must be so proud." My mother's response, which she'd accidentally sent to the entire board instead of just the colleague, read, "We've always supported Natalie's hobbies, though we wish she'd focused more on financial stability. Family is complicated." Dr. Ortega's message to me was brief. "Thought you should see this. Also thought you should know." The entire board immediately replied, calling out her dismissiveness. "You have more allies than you know." I read the email thread she'd forwarded, watching person after person defend my work and question my mother's characterization of a nationally recognized program as a hobby. One board member had written, "With all due respect, Diane, your daughter has accomplished more in arts advocacy than most people do in entire careers. Perhaps complicated means you're struggling to accept her success on terms you didn't define." I saved the email, not out of spite but as a reminder. The people who mattered could see what I'd built. The ones who didn't were becoming increasingly irrelevant. That weekend, Dominic flew to Austin to meet with me and tour the studio space I'd been using for artist workshops. He arrived Saturday morning in casual clothes, jeans and a navy sweater, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in Aspen. "This is perfect," he said, walking through the converted warehouse space. "Exactly the kind of authentic environment that makes your program work." We spent 2 hours discussing expansion plans. With his funding, I could bring on 2 part-time staff members, expand the mentorship program to accommodate 50 artists instead of 20, and launch a scholarship fund for materials and exhibition costs. The scope of what was suddenly possible felt overwhelming in the best way. "I want to be careful not to grow too fast," I said as we sat on folding chairs in the corner of the studio. "The moment this becomes about numbers instead of people, it loses what makes it matter." "Agreed," Dominic said. "That's why I'm suggesting you grow in phases. Pilot the expansion with 1 additional city, see what works, adjust what doesn't, then scale from there." "Which city were you thinking?" He smiled slightly. "I was hoping you'd choose. My foundation has properties in 12 cities. Pick the one where you think the need is greatest." I thought about it, mentally reviewing arts funding data and community need assessments I'd researched over the years. "Detroit," I said finally. "Strong creative community, historically underfunded, and a population that's been overlooked by traditional arts institutions." "Detroit it is," he said. "I'll have my team start identifying space." We moved to a nearby cafe for lunch, the conversation shifting from business to more personal territory. He asked about my background, my path from marketing to arts advocacy, the moment I'd realized I couldn't keep building other people's visions instead of my own. It wasn't dramatic, I admitted. I just woke up one day and realized I was 32 years old and couldn't name a single thing I'd built that I actually cared about. Everything was client work, contract work, other people's dreams executed with my labor. So you walked away? Eventually. It took another year of talking myself into and out of it. But yes, eventually I quit, took the money I'd saved, and gave myself 2 years to make Voices Unframed sustainable or go back to corporate work. And here you are, Dominic said, his tone warm. 3 years in and partnering with a foundation that wants to help you scale. Here I am, I echoed, still slightly amazed by the trajectory. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with that direct gaze I was beginning to recognize. Can I tell you something I've noticed about you? Sure. You still don't quite believe you deserve this. The success, the recognition, the partnership. You're grateful for it, but you don't fully own it yet. His observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. I shifted in my seat. What makes you say that? The way you deflect compliments. The way you attribute success to luck or timing instead of your own vision and effort. The way you seemed genuinely surprised when people responded positively to your work, like you'd been preparing for rejection instead of recognition. I was quiet for a moment, processing. You're not wrong. I spent a long time being told my ideas weren't practical, my work wasn't serious, my goals weren't realistic. It's hard to unlearn that voice. I know, he said gently. I had similar voices when I started. Mine said immigrants' kids don't become tech founders, that people like me should be grateful for middle management positions and stop reaching for more. Unlearning those voices is part of the work. How did you do it? He considered the question. I stopped seeking permission. Stopped waiting for someone to tell me I was allowed to build what I was building. And I surrounded myself with people who saw possibility instead of limitations. Is that what you're doing with me? I asked, half teasing. Surrounding me with possibility? He smiled. I'm trying to reflect back what's already there. You built Voices Unframed before anyone was paying attention, before any funding existed, before it was convenient or profitable. That's not luck. That's conviction. Own it. We finished lunch and walked through downtown Austin, the afternoon sun warm despite the lingering spring chill. At some point, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, favorite books, and worst travel experiences and the kinds of small details you share when you're building friendship alongside professional partnership. When we reached my car, Dominic paused. I'm hosting a small gathering next month in Malibu. Nothing formal, just some people from various fields I think you'd connect with. Artists, entrepreneurs, activists. Would you consider coming? To Malibu? I asked, slightly surprised. To my home, actually. I do this once a quarter, bring together people who are building interesting things and let them cross-pollinate ideas. I think you'd get a lot out of it, and I know they'd benefit from meeting you. I'll think about it, I said, though I was already leaning toward yes. He smiled, reading my hesitation accurately. No pressure. But I hope you'll come. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the expansion work. Hiring staff, developing curriculum for the Detroit pilot, coordinating with Dominic's team on gallery space. The days blurred together in the best way, each one full of purpose and momentum. I'd stopped checking the filtered folder where my family's messages accumulated. Whatever they were saying no longer felt urgent or relevant. My life was moving forward, and they were becoming increasingly peripheral to it. Then, one evening in mid-May, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the sun had already set, leaving my apartment complex in that dim twilight between day and night. I checked the peephole and felt my stomach drop. My father stood on the doorstep, looking older than I remembered, his shoulders slightly stooped in his jacket. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called through it. What are you doing here, Dad? Can we talk, Natalie? Please. How did you get my address? Your mother got it from the university alumni directory. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I considered calling security, then decided I wanted to hear what he had to say. Not because I thought it would change anything, but because I was curious what justification he'd constructed for showing up unannounced. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. 5 minutes. He looked at me, something uncomfortable crossing his face. You look good. Successful. What do you want? He shifted his weight. Your mother and we've been seeing articles about your program. People keep sending them to us, asking why we weren't at that event in Aspen. It's becoming embarrassing. Embarrassing for you, I clarified. For all of us. People think we're bad parents, that we don't support you. You don't, I said simply. You called my work a hobby. You took the tickets I bought you and used them for Crystal's vacation. You mocked me in group chats and dismissed everything I was trying to build. So yes, people think you're bad parents. Because you were. He flinched. We made mistakes. But we're family. That should count for something. It did count for something, I replied. It counted for years of me trying to earn approval I was never going to get. It counted for me funding your emergencies while you called me financially irresponsible. It counted for me making myself smaller so you could feel bigger. That's what family counted for. So what, you're just going to cut us off? Pretend we don't exist? I'm going to stop letting you define my worth. If that feels like being cut off to you, that's your interpretation, not my intention. My father's expression hardened. You always were stubborn. Just like your grandmother. I'll take that as a compliment. He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. I hope you don't regret this when you're older. Family is all you have in the end. No, I said quietly. Family is what you build, not what you're born into. And I've built something good with people who actually show up. He turned and walked back to his car without another word. I watched him drive away, then closed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. From adrenaline, from the visceral act of holding a boundary I'd never managed to hold before. I texted Dominic, not because I needed him to fix anything, but because I wanted to share the moment with someone who'd understand. My father just showed up uninvited. I held my ground. Feels strange but right. His response came within minutes. Proud of you. That takes courage most people never find. 3 weeks later, I flew to Malibu for Dominic's gathering. His home was stunning, all glass and clean lines perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The gathering was exactly as he'd described, intimate and eclectic. A documentary filmmaker working on incarceration reform. A sustainable fashion designer from Copenhagen. An architect designing low-income housing that didn't look like low-income housing. And me, the arts advocate from Austin who'd stumbled into something bigger than she'd planned. Dominic introduced me to each person individually, always with context about my work that made it clear he'd been paying attention. The conversations that unfolded over dinner were the kind I'd spent years craving, substantive and challenging and full of people actually listening to each other. After dinner, Dominic found me on the deck overlooking the ocean. The sound of waves filled the space between us. Thank you for coming, he said. I know it's far from Austin. Thank you for inviting me. These are exactly the kind of people I needed to meet. He leaned against the railing beside me. I have something I want to ask you, but I want to be clear about something first. Okay. The partnership between our foundations is professional and will remain professional regardless of your answer to this question. I don't want you to feel any pressure or concern that this impacts our working relationship. My heart rate picked up slightly. What's the question? I'd like to take you to dinner. Not as collaborators or colleagues, but as two people who've enjoyed getting to know each other. If that's not something you're interested in, I understand completely and nothing changes between us professionally. I looked at him, this man who'd seen my work before anyone else did, who'd offered partnership without conditions, who'd somehow made me feel both challenged and supported in equal measure. I'd like that, I said. I'd like that a lot. He smiled, genuine relief crossing his features. Good. Because I've been trying to figure out how to ask for weeks without making things awkward. You didn't make it awkward. Yet, he said with a slight grin. Give me time. We stood there for a while, watching the moonlight on the water, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not the anxious hope of trying to earn someone's attention, but the quiet confidence of being seen and choosing to be seen in return. The next morning, over coffee on his deck, he asked about my family situation. I told him the truth, the whole messy truth about Crystal and my parents and the years of feeling invisible. Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them? He asked. I don't know. Maybe someday, if they're willing to actually acknowledge what happened instead of just wanting to move past it. But I'm not waiting around for that anymore. I spent too many years on hold for people who never called back. That's fair, he said. And healthy. 2 months later, the Detroit pilot launched. The response was overwhelming, applications from artists far exceeding our capacity. We selected an initial cohort of 15, each one bringing perspectives and experiences that would have been excluded from traditional programs. The Arts Quarterly piece had sparked a cascade of coverage. Local news segments, podcast interviews, an invitation to speak at a TEDx event in Boston. My calendar was full, my bank account was stable, and my work was reaching people I'd never imagined it would reach. And through it all, Dominic was there. Not hovering or controlling, but present in the way that mattered. He attended the Detroit launch, flew to Austin for the TEDx prep sessions, sent articles and ideas that might be useful. We had dinner once a week when we were in the same city, talked on the phone when we weren't, built something that felt real and solid and unrushed. For months after Aspen, I received an email from a name I didn't recognize immediately. When I opened it, I realized it was from Blake, Crystal's husband. Natalie, I don't know if you'll read this, but I wanted to reach out. Crystal and I are getting divorced. The reasons are complicated, but part of it is that I've realized how much her treatment of you reflected larger patterns I was ignoring. I'm sorry I went along with it. I'm sorry I used those tickets. You deserved better from all of us. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just wanted you to know that some of us are starting to see things clearly. Blake. I read it twice, then saved it to a folder without responding. Maybe eventually I'd reply, maybe I wouldn't. But for now, it was enough to know that the truth had a way of surfacing, even when people spent years trying to bury it. That evening, Dominic and I had dinner at a quiet restaurant in downtown Austin. He'd flown in for a board meeting and extended his stay through the weekend. Over wine and pasta, he asked what I was thinking about. My family, I admitted. Blake sent an apology email today. Crystal's husband, soon-to-be ex-husband apparently. How do you feel about it? Indifferent, mostly. It's nice that he's realized some things, but it doesn't change what happened. And it's not my job to absolve him just because he's experiencing consequences. Dominic nodded. You're allowed to just let it be what it is. That's what I'm learning, I said. That not everything requires a response or resolution. Some things just end. He reached across the table and took my hand. For what it's worth, I think you've handled all of this with remarkable grace. You could have burned everything down publicly. Instead, you just built something better and let that speak for itself. Is that what I did? I asked, smiling slightly. That's exactly what you did. 6 months after the Aspen Gala, Voices Unframed had expanded to 3 cities, secured ongoing funding from 4 major foundations, and been featured in national media more times than I could count. My sister hadn't contacted me since Aspen. My parents sent a card on my birthday with a generic message and no acknowledgement of anything that had happened. I sent it to the recycling bin unopened. I'd stopped waiting for them to apologize or understand. I'd stopped needing them to witness my success for it to feel real. Their absence no longer felt like abandonment. It felt like space I'd filled with work that mattered and people who showed up. Dominic and I had been dating for 4 months, though we'd been careful to keep it private given our professional partnership. But when he asked me to accompany him to a gala in New York where he was receiving a humanitarian award, I said yes. The night of the event, I wore a dress that made me feel powerful, deep burgundy silk that moved like water. Dominic's hand rested lightly on my back as we walked into the venue, and when photographers asked who I was, he introduced me not as his date but by name and title. "This is Natalie Torres, founder of Voices Unframed." And for the first time in my life, being introduced on my own terms, for my own work, with someone who saw me as an equal rather than an accessory, I felt completely at home in my own skin. Later that night, as we stood on a balcony overlooking the city, he asked me something I hadn't expected. "What would you say if I told you I was falling in love with you?" I turned to look at him, this man who'd somehow become both partner and companion, who'd seen me at my worst and stayed anyway. "I'd say I've been falling too," I replied. "And it's terrifying and right at the same time." He smiled and pulled me close. "That's exactly how it should feel." 1 year after the Aspen Gala, I stood in the same Belmont Foundation ballroom for the second annual showcase. This time, there were 40 artists instead of 15. This time, major collectors and gallery owners had confirmed attendance months in advance. This time, I walked in not hoping for validation but knowing I'd earned my place. Dominic stood beside me at the entrance, his hand in mine, watching the crowd gather. "Nervous?" he asked. "No," I said honestly. "Grateful." My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out and saw a text from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was from Crystal. The message was short. I saw the article in Vanity Fair. "Congratulations. You were right. About everything." I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling nothing. Not vindication, not satisfaction, just a distant acknowledgement that she'd finally admitted what I'd known all along. I showed the text to Dominic. "Are you going to respond?" he asked. I thought about it, then shook my head. No. Some chapters close without epilogues. I deleted the message and put my phone away. Then I walked into the ballroom with Dominic beside me, ready to celebrate the artists who'd trusted me with their dreams, ready to continue building something that didn't require my family's blessing to matter. Because the truth I'd learned over the past year was simple but profound. The people who called you a loser were just revealing their own limitations. And the people who called you a queen were showing you what you'd been all along. I chose to listen to the ones who'd been right. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.